we are going to dispense with the intro music for the program today because Christy Hernandez, manager of the Workforce Center here in Down North, has like important things to do. And she graciously took some time out of her busy day to come join us to talk about what is happening in our community regarding employment and training and internships and economy and all of that kind of stuff. Christy Hernandez, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Let me ask you to just come a little bit closer to that mic or bring it a little bit closer to you so that way people can hear what you have to say.
All right.
All right. So, Christy, do you mind if I call you Christy?
Sure.
So, part of the format of this program is that very often people we talk to who are local, they're very well known for what they do. You know, you're pretty well known in the community for what you do with the Workforce Center. But one of the things that we also try to do is to try to get an idea of who you are and why you do what you do. And I guess the question to kind of get into that is, you know, so what is it about your life and your life experiences and your values that bring you to doing this work with the Del Norte Workforce Center?
Well, I moved to Crescent City in 2006. I was born and raised in the Sacramento area, Lodi to be exact.
Sure, know where it is.
And I would come up for vacations as a kid with my parents. Every year we'd come up to Crescent City. My mother was born here, and my great-grandmother had a place on the river, so we decided, let's move and make sure that it doesn't disintegrate into the earth, because it's an old 1940s type of cabin. So that's kind of what brought us up here. And it was my parents, myself, and my then 2-year-old daughter. And it was hard finding work here. And I was always used to being in the, Lodi or Sacramento area, and just wherever I applied, I would usually end up getting the job. And I noticed it was a difficult place to find employment. I thought, what's wrong with me? Why am I not finding? And we hear that a lot from a lot of transplants too, even our locals that say, you know what is it that I'm doing, or I'm not getting callbacks, or I'm not, and it's just, it is a smaller community. So it seems like if you have the contacts and do the networking and find people that way, as far as applying and having somebody to kind of vouch for you, it seems a lot easier to go that route. So when you're brand new here, it was hard to find employment.
That raises a couple of questions, because one of the things that I've seen over time is that, I mean, there was a time when there was a time when you could just basically walk into, I grew up in Chicago, very different environment, obviously, where you could just walk into a factory, and if you didn't get a job there, you walked next door, and you walked next door, and pretty soon, you'd get a job. But in more modern times, there used to be a time, it seemed like, where if you applied for a job, you at least got some acknowledgement. And if you didn't get the job, you got something that said, yeah, thank you for applying, you weren't chosen, best of luck, blah, 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 blah. That doesn't seem to happen much anymore. It's just you put in resume after resume after resume into this black hole, and you either get the job or that's the last you ever hear about it, right?
You're wondering, did they get my application? Because a lot of businesses are going to the online applications now, so it's hard to even know, did it reach the person that it needed to reach to here locally? So it is, that is something that happens quite a bit. And when we are hiring for a position, like in our office, or if we're doing the kind of the screening and the interviewing for another business or organization, we try to make it a point to at least send out letters or emails or contact people to let them know one way or another. Because I was in, like I said, I was in that predicament to where I'm like, okay, I interviewed, I followed up, but I'm not getting any response as to, are you still thinking about it? Or is it, or have you made your decision? It's instead of being in limbo for folks that are out there, looking for work, that's why we try to make it a point in our office to let people know for sure. But yeah, that happens a lot, to where unless you're following up and doing that due diligence and checking in with the actual local store here, even if you apply online, sometimes you don't ever hear anything.
Well, and even if it's just a matter, to get confirmed, you didn't get the job.
Yeah.
Well, is there something I might have done better? What could I do next time to improve my chances? Which used to be fairly standard, at least and they would give you some kind of an answer.
Yeah.
You don't even get that.
No, it's pretty rare to get that.
So the other question it raises for me, and we are speaking with Christy Hernandez, manager of the Del Norte Workforce Center. You're tuned to KFUG Crescent City. This is Public Process. I'm your host, Mike Thornton. So what I was hearing you say was, you were applying for jobs. I'm sure you were applying for jobs that you were qualified for. So it wasn't a matter of I'm applying to be a NASA astronaut or something,
Yeah.
Which you may be qualified to do that. I mean, what do I know, right?
I am not.
Neither am I. So I guess it leads me to this, right? Is if we are saying that part of the issue with getting employment, particularly in a community like this, has, as it always has to some degree, a little bit more maybe with who you know than what you know. Mm-hmm. I mean, that poses real problems for many people, particularly people who are marginally skilled, mm-hmm. I would think, right? Mm-hmm. Am I wrong in that?
No, that sounds correct. And that's one thing when we go into the high schools, even to talk about the Workforce Center and the different resources that we have, we always mention that networking is going to be key for you finding work. I mean, even if it's with a coach and you let them know that, hey, I'm looking for work, it is really who you know and who likes you, basically, and who's going to kind of be an extra pair of eyes and ears for you out there to try to get you some employment. And we have some other resources at the Workforce Center, but yeah, it is going to be, especially in a smaller area, I've noticed once we moved here, that networking is definitely key for finding work.
Part of the reason why I'm raising this, and as listeners know, I will often say, this is me talking, not Christy talking or whoever is with me. I mean, we have discussed off air how difficult it is to tell our voices apart. That's part of the reason why I want to make this really clear that it's me. And the reason I'm raising this is because I often have both in-person and Facebook and social media discussions with people around issues related to homelessness. Mm-hmm. And very often it's like, well, they should pull themselves up out of the mud and go get a job, And my point is, that's a lot easier said than done. Yes. And from what I'm hearing you say, that's borne out in reality, that the idea that you're just, and I'm talking about people who are homeless, you may or may not wish to engage in this conversation, but, to expect somebody to lift themselves up out of the mud in the woods mm-hmm. and get a job in this community is asking a lot.
It is. I mean, we have had a few of our youth that are homeless, and it's like, I know they need a job, but are they ready to have the job, right? I mean, they have to have that stable living environment. They need to have those basic needs met before they could even get to that point. But then how do they get the basic needs if they don't have money? And It's just a big, yes. So it's difficult. I don't know the answer to how that would work, but the few youth that we have helped, we try to work on those basic needs as best that we can with the limited funding that we have, and then try to use any other resources that we know of to try to get those basic needs met before we can make that leap to then finding employment.
It's very interesting, and I don't want to go down the homelessness rabbit hole, and because I can very easily do that. But they were the school district recently did this LCAP process, and I'm bringing this up for a very specific reason, because one of the answers they got related to student need, and we're talking particularly about the most vulnerable students, was that they were getting these responses about basic needs. And I know some educators, at least I was told this, I didn't hear it firsthand, went, well, yes, of course they have basic needs like reading and writing and arithmetic. And said, no, they're talking about food and shelter and clothes, and shoes and sleep to be able to actually go to school and learn how to read, write, and do mathematics and all of that.
Yes.
So we've talked a little bit about youth, but the Workforce Center doesn't just exclusively work with youth, right?
No, anybody, any age. Our office is open to the community, and we do have certain programs with age requirements, but then we also have our regular adult program, which is just 18 and older. There's no cap on that. It's pretty much for anybody, as long as they have the right to work documents, which would be photo ID and social security card typically. And that's pretty much the basic eligibility for our adult program, which for that program, we mainly help with occupation-specific training. So in our area, it's nursing. That's what we have at College of the Redwoods as far as occupation-specific. And then we've done some truck driver training. We do on-the-job trainings with local businesses. So there's different options for folks. And then our youth program is 18 to 24-year-olds, and they primarily we try to focus on out-of-school youth. And there just needs to be one barrier that's met in order to be eligible for it, and that could be they've never had a full-time job, maybe they're a parent, maybe they dropped out, or they had some justice involvement. There's a few different options. So there's almost always a way that we can make a youth eligible, as long as they haven't ever maybe worked a full-time job, or at least for a long period of time. There's a way that we can make them eligible for a program. And then during that program, it's mainly internships. We do paid internships with our youth. We've also done some training as well, but primarily it's been paid internships where they tell us what their interest is, and then we try to find a business that kind of fits that interest and go from there.
Do you have a significant number of young parents who are looking for work? I realize that's a very broad
I'm trying
question.
to think if I think back in our caseloads that we have right now, there's a good number. There's not a huge amount that come in that are parents, but it might, out of our maybe 25 or so that we enroll per year, I want to say maybe there's a little under 10 that might be parents, so that's pretty good
that
for
seems
that.
Pretty close to 50%.
Yeah, for that group that comes in. So it's, I guess it is pretty significant now that I think about it.
Part of the reason why I ask, of course, is being. I don't mean this the way it's going to sound, but I mean being an adult and having a stable job and home life and all of that. And I guess when I say being an adult, I guess what I really mean is hopefully having developed a little bit of a maturity to be able to deal with being a parent is a full-time gig, you know what I mean?
I know.
And then also, trying to find work and perhaps being young and having other challenges in addition to being a parent's got to be very
Yes.
difficult, I would think.
I would think so too. Luckily, I had my daughter when I was older. And so I can't even imagine having a child at that younger age, especially nowadays. It seems that there are more challenges being younger. I know it always has been, but it just seems more so now for some reason. And I think it might be that maturity level. I'm not sure, but yes, I couldn't even imagine.
Well, and it's another thing, and being an old guy, I get really tired of older people, going, when I was a kid, I walked both ways to school 5 miles uphill in the snow. It was a different world then, and you cannot apply what it was like in the 1950s or the 1960s or the 1970s, and then demand that these young people in 2019 somehow or another adhere to whatever you think life was for you, and that still applies.
I have to catch myself too when I think about, well, when I was my daughter's 15, so I think, gosh, when I was 15, I was, we had a family restaurant, I was working in it, that's what I was doing every day after work or after school, and so just and I have to stop and say, nope, it's not the same as back in 1980, 1990, and so it's I know I have to bite my tongue sometimes.
Well, and it's just really, I think for me, it's really people in communities who have power and authority and position tend to be older. And we have a tendency to think that, well, this was the way I lived my life and this is what I did and all that. Well, that's great, That doesn't necessarily apply to everybody else. I mean, it may, but it might not, and just to try to keep that in mind, right? And
exactly.
And at least have some ability to consider that it might not be the way it was for you when you were growing up.
Yes.
19 minutes past the top of the hour, you are tuned to KFUG Crescent City, 101.1 on your FM radio dial, worldwide on the internet, kfogradio.org. This is Public Process. I'm Mike Thornton, and we are joined by Christy Hernandez, manager of the Del Norte Workforce Center. So, Christy, in addition to job training, and I want to get back to that, the Workforce Center also acts as kind of a clearinghouse, right, for employment. I mean, there's job listings that you wouldn't necessarily have to go through a training program or something like that to be able to access one of those jobs, right?
Correct. So we have we call them our universal services that's available for anybody. They don't need to be in a certain program or be eligible in order to access them. And that would be our computer lab. It's a small lab. We have I think there's 6, if I'm not mistaken, 6 computers in the lab. So whenever the office is open, the lab is open. So if people need to create a resume or a cover letter or just look online at job listings or apply online for different jobs, that's available. Take a typing test, do a ServSafe food handler course, which we try to do fundraising throughout the year to help pay for things like that. That typically costs $10 to $15 per course online, and a lot of businesses that are in the food industry are actually requiring people to have this ServSafe food handler card, even sometimes before they interview. So we try to make that available, and in our computer lab, they can come and take the course and get the card, which lasts for 3 years. And we'll pay for it, typically, if we have the funding, which we try to always have.
Well, and I'm sorry, but I'd like to get back to this thing of fundraising. Mm-hmm. So I have 2 questions.
Yes.
One is, when you're talking about fundraising for things like that, what kind of things are you talking about? So
we do an annual quarter craze that we raise funds for this separate pot of money. seems like every year it gets stricter and stricter as far as our regulations for what our regular funding that we get funded for is allowable. And so we thought, well, since it was kind of done away with helping with just little things like $15 here or some work clothes just to get started for a part-time job, we thought, well, is there a way that we could try to come up with that money just to help with this little bit here and there for folks to just be able to find work, to obtain it, to keep it. So we do a quarter craze usually every year. And then there's some other fee for service that we do occasionally throughout the year, just with some businesses that kind of goes into our pot of money as well. So we don't do a whole lot, but it's usually enough because we, like I said, there's smaller amounts for each person, so it tends to last us for the whole year.
So let me ask this question before I get to my next one. And where does the bulk of your funding come from?
It comes through, it's the WIOA funding, so Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act funding, which is federal, and it comes from Department of Labor down to each state, so EDD for California, and then through there it's dispersed to the different consortiums, which we're under. It's called NORTEC, and they're located out of Chico, California. It's northern, oh gosh, let me see if I get this right, Northern Rural Training and Employment Consortium. Oh gosh, I hope I got that right. I should know it.
Let me give you a radio rule, right?
Yes.
Just say it. Just say it and say it with conviction, because most people, even if they know you're wrong, they'll go, wow, she sounded pretty sure about that. Maybe I'm wrong.
Good tip. Thank you for that. So it comes through NORTEC and then gets dispersed into the different providers that are under NORTEC. So there's 11 counties under NORTEC, and we are one of them. So that then gets trickled down to us, and it will depend. The funding allotment depends on population typically. So since we're smaller, it's not as much as what Chico is receiving. So it's, and every year, of course, just like with everything, it gets cut just a little bit. So then we have to just try to figure out, okay, so what do we do to just keep it going? Well,
and this is another one of those things that just absolutely drives me nuts, right? Okay, because it's two things. One is we talk about, well, the work ethic and people should work and all of that stuff. And then we do everything we can to make it harder to help them to actually get over that hump so they can do that. And it's the same thing with, school, right? With education. It's like, education, we have to have the best educated workforce in the world, you know what I mean? And then yet cut. Yes. And then it's like, it's not working. Well, of course it's not working. So you have this very, and I've had some experience working in government, so I know how this works. It's very conditional. It's very rigid in what it can be spent on.
Correct.
You have to 4 pieces of paper to spend 25 cents on something.
Oh gosh, yes.
And then yet you have all of these other kinds of needs, which are very sort of flexible and fungible based on, the person may have everything else but need a pair of work boots.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So that gets me to the other question I wanted to ask you, particularly related to the food handling cards. Why aren't local establishments providing that funding for you?
I know that.
I mean, it's in their interest, right?
Exactly. There are some local restaurants, I think, that take care of that for their employees, but then there are those that they say, nope, we're not even going to interview unless you have that. And it shows, and maybe it's just kind of an extra hoop to have folks jump through to show that they're really interested and want to take that extra step to get the job. I could see that on that side, as far as the employer side, but I totally understand what you're saying. It would be nice. And there are some that do take care of it for their employees, but then there are others that expect them to take care of it on their own.
No,
Yeah.
and I understand that
Yeah.
too. I mean, people are in business to make money. I get it, and all of that. And at the same time, I mean, and maybe this is just me, right? And I kind of look at this as a community that is poor, isolated, has a lot of challenges. Many of the people in this community are facing a lot of struggles in their lives. Whatever you think, those are facts, those are realities. And I mean, throwing $15 in the pot, so somebody can become, an employed, stable, tax-paying citizen who might then be able to go on and have a family and buy stuff and all of that and kind of lift up the overall economics of the community. I mean, that seems like a small investment to me, right?
Very small.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, it's in everybody's interest, right? Having an employable workforce, just like having an educated workforce, having people in a position where it's easier for them to be part of the economic system and see their self-interest represented in it, I think at some point makes a lot of things easier for an entire community. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yes, totally.
We're speaking with Christy Hernandez, manager of the Del Norte Workforce Center, 28 minutes past the top of the hour. So, I was going to promote you to executive director of the Del Norte Workforce
Many
Center.
people do.
But then I found out that actually you're the manager and there's a reason for that.
Yes.
Why is that?
So I oversee the office here in Del Norte, and then our kind of administrative entity is in Weed, California.
I've always loved that name.
I know it. It's so fun to drive through that town and see all of the different paraphernalia that is around. So Siskiyou Training and Employment Program oversees our funding, and that's what happens a lot of time through because it's just easier to have one administrative entity holding the money, and then the different one-stops is what we used to be called. Job centers, I think now is what America's Job Centers of California is what we are. And I think it just saves on costs that way. So a lot of folks have kind of consolidated, and so that's why we are under a step is what we call them, and it's been great being under them, and because they have years of experience doing this. The staff has been doing it for 30 years or more, and it's just great to have that kind of place to ask questions. When I started in 2007, so I've been there 12 years now, we were pretty much all brand new at the time, even our director. And so it was we kind of just all learned as we did it. So it's nice to have that kind of backup.
Yeah. And I would think, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's still, administrative, paperwork that has to be done and all of that. But it sounds like having, this other kind of entity that can maybe manage other aspects of that, it would allow you and the other people who work there to focus more on what you probably got into doing this for anyway, right?
Exactly. Yes, I don't have to worry so much about all the budgets and the proposals and the this and that and a bunch of just paperwork involved with securing our funding. It's nice that we have an executive director that does that for us. And so, yes, it definitely frees up my time to be able to focus on the different programs that we either want to run locally or just focusing on the ones that we continue just to make available.
So I'd like us to switch gears if we can to kind of like talk about some macroeconomic issues if we can.
Okay.
So here's my thing, okay? Is I was at the relatively recent economic summit, right? And young man, Adam Goldstein, was there. He was sort of the featured person. And so, and I've actually interviewed Adam, and I've had him on this program and asked him about these things as well. And so here's my thing. What I got out of that economic summit was that there was a lot of excitement about, having Del Norte and Crescent City become this kind of like new tourist mecca for Bay Area millennials with lots of money who would fly in and out on Contour airwaves. And they'll come in, and I know, as Adam has, bought oceanfront property and or other things. And I think the rationale was, if you bring these people into the community with money, the fact that they have money, they will also start demanding that there are amenities and services, and then the community will respond by providing those amenities and services using their money to help create and pay for them. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So here's my concern, right? My concern is I've seen communities that have gone into this sort of full-blown tourist economy strategy. And that can work really well for business owners and other folks and, people who have some wealth themselves. But what does it do to the regular folks in the community, right? Related to their employment chances, their ability to move forward. When it comes to, and if this is an unfair question, it's an unfair question, and you can say it's unfair, or you could even say, Mike, it's stupid. When it comes to these types of macro community economic development strategies, are organizations like the Workforce Center involved in those discussions? Are there discussions? And what role do the people who actually wind up needing to find ways to be employed and to pay rent and to support and raise their families within this economic framework, what role, if any, do they have in any of these discussions, right? Right?
Yes.
Okay, do you understand what I'm asking, right?
I do.
Okay.
I think I do.
Okay. Well, I mean, yeah, I think about this stuff a lot, and I mean, and it's scary in there sometimes, but if it makes sense, what are your thoughts about that?
So we get invited to different conversations. I haven't been invited to anything around that topic yet, but we usually get an invite, not always, but usually, and I totally understand that it should be more of that customer-centered design, right? To where, okay, if we're going to make a huge change in this community and make it even more of this, although we are really we have a huge tourist industry.
Right,
it's not,
right.
yeah,
and it's not all bad.
No, that it would be great if that was going to be the shift for our community, that the community that will be making, filling those jobs and helping fill those jobs was in the conversation. That would just be like a no-brainer, you would think. But I know that doesn't always happen with folks in the decision-making chairs. But typically we have been involved and like I said, in certain conversations around that. It's been a while since we've been. So if that was the route that folks were thinking of going, it would be nice to have an invite and a voice.
I'm assuming that if you got a call to be invited to a discussion like that, you would be happy to attend, is what I'm hearing you say.
Definitely, yes.
We're speaking with Christy Hernandez, manager of the Del Norte Workforce Center. 11:36 on this Monday morning. I'm Mike Thornton. This is Public Process on your community radio station, KFUG. And I don't I don't want to turn this into a, macroeconomic discussion
Good,
of down north.
I didn't do very good in macroeconomics
I didn't
in college.
Hey, look at it. Look, if anybody who knows my life knows the first half of it was, it was what it was. And then since then, I've run drug rehab programs and mental health programs. I've been in radio. I've been a community organizer. I am not like a Harvard macroeconomics guy. I mean, I have some thoughts.
Yeah.
They're my thoughts, People may go keep them your thoughts. I guess what I'm getting at, and it's just this thing of I always get concerned that it's like, well, we're gonna build this really, really cool economy, and it will bring money in. And then that's going to fix everything, right? Whereas I think that as a community, as a country, as a society, we'd all be a lot better off if we said, so we have this community. What's it going to take to make this community thrive for as many people as possible? And then create an economy that supports that. Does that make sense?
Yes. No. Totally. And I think, just like with Adam, they're coming up here for a reason. It's not
cheap property.
Well, and it's beautiful here.
It is beautiful.
Yeah. And so I think we have to think about that too, is that we don't want to go and change a lot of things if they're coming here for a reason to see the redwoods, to see, what beautiful coastline we have and the rivers and it's like, okay, there might be a few things that we could possibly add to our community to make it, slightly better for those millennials coming in. But I think just like with him, he came here because he saw the redwoods and he saw how beautiful it was. So why do we need to necessarily change a whole lot?
Well, and
would be my thought.
Yeah, no. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. And not changing it so it diminishes. And particularly if that winds up pricing kind of homegrown people out of the area.
Yes.
Because in some of these other areas where they've done this tourist thing, people have had to move 30 miles away. They can't live in the cool tourist town anymore, because they work at the restaurant. So they have to live somewhere else. In some places that's viable. That's not even viable here, because if you're not here, and when I'm saying here, basically I'm saying Crescent City, Klamath, Smith River. If you're not here, well, you're not going to live in Brookings. What are you going to do? Go to Grants Pass? You're going to move to Eureka? You can't afford to live there either.
No, yeah.
And so that's my concern, is it winds up pushing, basically it's gentrification.
Yeah.
And it winds up pushing working people and working families out.
The people that are doing all of the work.
The people who are doing all of the work, yes.
Tourist,
that's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Once again, this is me talking. We need a lot more garbage collectors than we do hedge fund managers. Okay, I'm just saying. If you want to talk about what makes a society run, garbage collectors, teachers, doctors, nurses, things like that, we don't need an increase in hedge fund managers and speculators and high-speed trading investors and all of that. They could go do that. That's what New York is for. You're tuned to KFUG, Crescent City. I'm Mike Thornton. This is Public Process, 1141 on this Monday morning. We're speaking with Christy Hernandez, manager of the Del Norte Workforce Center. What are the skills that business owners need? I keep hearing a lot about soft skills.
Yes.
Is that a real thing?
That is.
What does that mean?
So soft skills would be could be communication, just showing up to work, communicating with your supervisor if you're going to be late. It's really like attendance, attitude. Attitude is huge. Appearance, all these soft skills that we hear not only our youth might be lacking in from what we hear from employers, but also the adults that are coming in and applying for work. So there's the soft skills, and then there's the hard skills that are like typing and cooking, so the soft skills are more of the integrity, work ethic, that sort of thing that employers just seem to have a hard time finding in our job seekers. And that's one of the reasons that we created our summer youth program, E3, that focuses on our high school students.
What does E3 stand for?
Good question. It's experience, education, and employment. So we partner with the Del Norte County Office of Education, and we have created this summer program. We just finished our third summer. And we focus on high school juniors, seniors, and then recently graduated. And we do a week of work readiness boot camp to where we do a lot of that work ethic type training, as well as customer service, a little bit of cash handling, some financial literacy or budgeting stuff. And they get a chance to interview with the different work sites that participate in the program. So then they're getting interview practice. And then the work sites are the ones that actually choose which youth will work in their place of business for the 4 or 6 weeks. And in addition to getting paid, they also earn up to 10 high school elective credits, which is nice.
So I want to try to say what I really mean here. Is this challenge with soft skills, is that something that is particularly prominent here? Is that something that cuts across generationally? And what is the root of that? I mean, I realize those are huge questions. I mean,
yeah, and we see it when we go to conferences for the California Workforce Association. When we go to those conferences, that brings folks from all over California to this one location, and this always is a topic of conversation
with everyone who's working in this field.
Yes,
okay.
Soft skills, huge. So it's not just Del Norte.
So let me ask this question, and once again, it's one of those. It may only make sense to me, but so in your opinion, how much of this is based in kind of a, and I apologize to the listeners, and I'm not trying to offend anyone. I want to be really clear on that. How much of this is based in a multi-generational lack of these things or inability to transmit them, and or groups of people, both young and or older, who have kind of said, this system doesn't work for me, so why should I care? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yes. And I think that is one of the reasons why we created this summer program too, is because we thought if we just had, because not all of our youth or adults might have that role model that at home, if it's a youth that is working or has had a job their entire life. I mean, so that was one of the reasons, is because not everybody has that kind of example to show them how to have the soft skills, to teach them that this is important. And I think that was one of the main reasons why we did that, is just to show our young people out there that this is what it means to have a job. This is how you need to act to have a job. And because we know that is the case for a lot of our young people out there, not everybody has that example of somebody that has a job at home. So I see that, and I know, just talking to other colleagues, like I said, throughout the state, it's not just here, it's in big cities as well.
Right.
Yeah.
We're speaking with Christy Hernandez, manager of the Del Norte Workforce Center. 11:47 on this Monday morning. Christy, I know you have to get out of here a little early, and I appreciate you coming in. So, final thoughts for the audience, and also contact information if they think that they or someone else they know can maybe utilize the Workforce Center services?
Yes. So our office, although people still go to our old location, even though it's been 3 years now that we've been at the new building, we call it still. We are at 875 5th Street. So we're on the corner of 5th and I Street. And we're right across from the fire station there on 5th. And we are open Monday through Thursday, 9 to 4, closed for lunch from noon to 1. And then Fridays we're open from 9 to noon. So come down. We have our job listings that we update every Tuesday. That is on our website. And that is DNWFC, so Del Norte Workforce Center, those letters, and .org. And you can click on job listings. We update them and put the new next to the new ones that are happening that week to make it easy. And we put everybody's job listings on one location to make it easier for job seekers, to where they don't have to go to various websites of different businesses or organizations. We try to keep it all together for folks looking to make it a little easier. So come down, utilize our resources. If you need copies of resumes, nothing costs for us. So if you need to fax something, anything like that, we are there and ready to help in any way.
Christy Hernandez, manager of the Del Norte Workforce Center, thank you for being with us today on Public Process. I really hope that we can have you on again to explore more issues related to employment and training in our community, and also maybe find a way to keep people regularly updated about what you're doing and how they might be able to take advantage of the services that you offer there.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you so much for coming in.
All right.